There is a sacred truth many fail to recognize. Love does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes cloaked in silence, wrapped in hesitation, and hidden behind walls built long before you ever appeared. When someone carries an avoidant heart, you are not simply meeting a person, you are encountering a history, a pattern, a defense that once kept them safe. And so, if you are waiting for love to look obvious, to sound like constant reassurance, to feel like endless closeness, you may miss it entirely, because for them, love is not easy, it is not natural, it is not effortless, and yet it is real. You will see it in the way they linger just a little longer than they planned, in the way they remember things you thought they ignored, in the way they circle back after distance, as if something invisible keeps pulling them toward you. This is not confusion, this is conflict. Understand this deeply. When an avoidant soul loves you, they are standing at the edge of their own fear. Every step toward you feels like a risk of losing themselves. Every moment of closeness challenges the identity they have built to survive, so they move in paradox. They come close, then retreat. They open up, then shut down. They feel deeply, but express sparingly. And if you do not have wisdom, you will misinterpret this as lack of love. But love, in its highest form, is not always fluent. Sometimes it stutters, sometimes it hides, sometimes it trembles before it speaks. The question is not, do they love you? The question is, can you recognize love when it doesn't look the way you expected? Because here is the divine principle. People can only love you to the depth they have learned to feel safe within themselves. An avoidant heart does not withhold love to punish you. It withholds because love, to them, has never been safe. And so, when they choose, despite that fear, to stay connected, to return, to care in the ways they can, it is significant, it is sacred. But listen carefully, because wisdom must guide your heart, not just emotion. You are not called to decode someone endlessly. Are not called to decode someone endlessly. You are not meant to abandon your needs to accommodate their fears. Love is not proven by how much confusion you can tolerate. True alignment happens when awareness meets truth. So if you see their effort, honor it. If you feel their care, acknowledge it. But also ask yourself, does this connection allow me to thrive or only to understand? Because love should not only be something you interpret, it should also be something you experience. And here is the transformation. When you stop chasing clarity from someone who fears giving it, you step into your own power. You no longer beg for expression. You become anchored in your own worth. From that place, everything becomes clear. Those who are capable will rise. Those who are not will fall away. And love, real, grounded, mutual love, will no longer feel like a mystery you have to solve, but a truth you can stand in. That is the difference between chasing love and embodying it. There is a quiet pattern you begin to notice, one that doesn't announce itself, but reveals its presence through repetition. They find reasons, small, almost unremarkable reasons, to be near you, not in a way that feels overwhelming or obvious, but in a manner so subtle that if you are not paying attention, you might dismiss it entirely. Yet it keeps happening again and again. They may not initiate deep conversations every time, and they may not always express excitement in ways you expect, but somehow they are there, responding to your messages, showing up in shared spaces, engaging just enough to maintain a thread of connection. This is not accidental. For someone who values distance as a form, of safety, proximity is a choice, even when it is disguised as coincidence. You will notice they position themselves within your orbit. It could be through checking in about something practical, offering help in understated ways, or simply being present where they know you will be. They might not say, "I want to be close to you," but their behavior whispers it. And in their world, whispers carry more truth than loud declarations. Understand the internal tension behind this. Part of them is drawn to you, curious about you, even comforted by your presence. But another part is calculating the risk, measuring how much closeness feels manageable before it threatens their sense of control. So they don't rush forward, they pace themselves carefully, maintaining a distance that allows them to feel connected without feeling exposed. This is why their proximity feels different. It is not bold or consuming. It is measured, intentional, and often indirect. They might sit near you, but not too close. They might reach out but keep the conversation light. They might stay longer than necessary, but leave before it feels too intimate. These are not mixed signals, they are controlled movements. And here's where deeper awareness becomes essential. Consistency matters more than intensity. Anyone can show up once with enthusiasm. Anyone can show up once with enthusiasm. But when someone who is naturally inclined to withdraw keeps choosing, in small ways, to remain present in your life, it reveals something deeper than fleeting interest. Their version of closeness is built on repetition, not intensity. It is in the steady rhythm of their presence, the way they continue to return, continue to engage, continue to keep the connection alive even when it would be easier for them to retreat completely. You may feel at times that it is not enough, that it lacks clarity or emotional depth, and that feeling is valid. But if you are seeking to understand their language, you must look beyond surface-level expressions and recognize the courage it takes for them to stay within reach at all. Because for someone who finds safety in distance, choosing proximity, even in its quietest form, is never casual. It is a deliberate act, one that speaks not through grand gestures, but through the simple repeated decision to not disappear. What you begin to realize, if you observe with patience, is that their love does not live in elaborate words. It does not rush to define itself, nor does it seek to impress through constant verbal reassurance. Instead, it reveals itself through what they do, quietly, consistently, and often without drawing attention to it. They may not tell you how much you mean to them, but they will show up when it matters. They will remember the details you mentioned in passing. They will find ways to make your life a little easier, a little lighter, without announcing their intention behind it. And if you are only listening for words, you might miss the language they are actually fluent in, because for them, words feel exposing. Words create expectations. Words demand a level of emotional clarity they are not always ready to hold. But actions allow them to care while still maintaining a sense of control. Through actions, they can express without feeling fully seen, give without feeling fully vulnerable. So they choose to do rather than say. You might notice they check on you in practical ways instead of emotional ones. They might ask if you got home safely rather than asking how you feel. They might help you solve a problem instead of sitting with your emotions. To an untrained eye, this can seem detached, even indifferent, but in truth, it is their way of participating in your world without stepping into territory that feels overwhelming to them. There is intention in this behavior. They are not guessing. They are paying attention. They remember your preferences, your routines, your struggles. They might not always respond with deep emotional dialogue, but they adjust their actions based on what they have learned about you. And that requires presence. That requires care. This is why their actions often carry more weight than their silence suggests. When they go out of their way for you, when they make time despite their tendency to withdraw, when they offer support in the ways they can manage, these are not random gestures. These are calculated choices that push against their natural inclination to remain distant. But here is the deeper truth you must hold with clarity. Actions without consistency do not equal love, and actions without emotional growth cannot sustain connection. It is one thing for someone to care through what they do. It is another for them to evolve in how they connect. So while you recognize and honor their efforts, you must also remain aware of your own needs. Love is not only about being cared for in fragments. It is about being met in fullness. Still, if you are seeking to understand them, you must learn to read what is not being said. Notice how they prioritize you in small decisions. Notice how they respond when you are in need. Notice how their behavior shifts, even subtly, to accommodate your presence in their life. Because in their world, actions are not just gestures, they are confessions. There are moments with them that feel almost unexpected, brief openings where something real slips through. It is not planned, not polished, and certainly not sustained for long, but it happens. A sentence that carries more emotion than usual. A truth shared without deflection. A glimpse into something they usually keep guarded. And if you are not paying close attention, you might overlook it because it does not arrive with emphasis. It comes quietly, almost as if they are testing the safety of the space between you. For someone who struggles with vulnerability, emotional exposure is not a natural state. It is a risk. It feels like stepping into unfamiliar territory. without knowing what will happen next. So they do not open all at once. They reveal themselves in fragments, in carefully measured pieces that they can quickly pull back if it feels too overwhelming. You may notice that these moments often come when they feel slightly more at ease, when the pressure is low, when the conversation is not demanding too much, when they are not being asked directly to open up. In those spaces, their guard lowers just enough for something genuine to emerge. It could be a personal story they have never shared. It could be a personal story they have never shared. A quiet admission about something that affected them. A fleeting expression of how they actually feel about you or the connection. And just as quickly as it appears, they may shift away from it, changing the subject, making a joke, or creating distance again. This is not inconsistency. This is calibration. They are trying to understand how much of themselves they can reveal without losing their sense of safety. Each small opening is an experiment. If I show this part of me, will I still be okay? Will I still be in control? Will I still be accepted? And so they move slowly, not because they lack depth, but because their depth has rarely felt safe to share. You might feel confused in these moments. One day they seem more open, more present, more emotionally available. The next, they retreat back into familiarity, as if that moment never happened. But the mistake would be to assume that the opening was not real. It was real. It just wasn't stable yet. Emotional openness, for them, is not a switch they can turn on and leave on. It is something they are learning, gradually, cautiously, and often with internal resistance. And every time they choose to share even a small piece of themselves, they are stepping beyond their comfort zone. This is why your response in those moments matters more than you may realize. If met with pressure, judgment, or overwhelming intensity, they are likely to retreat even further. But if met with steadiness, presence, and quiet understanding, it creates a sense of safety that makes future openness more possible. Still, awareness must guide you here. Small openings are meaningful, but they are not the same as emotional availability. They are signs of potential, not completion. So you learn to recognize them without over-interpreting them. You acknowledge the courage it takes for them to reveal even a fraction of what they feel, while also staying grounded in your own need for consistency and depth. Because what they show you in pieces today may, over time, become something more whole, but only if they are willing to continue stepping forward beyond fear into something real. There is a rhythm to their behavior that can feel confusing if you are expecting steadiness in the way most people define it. They move closer, and just when it begins to feel real, they pull away. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to make you question what just happened. And then, after some time, they return. And not always with explanation. Not always with clarity, but with presence again, as if the distance in between carried its own unspoken process. This pattern is not sluichiness, it is vuntrani conflict, playing out in real time. One part of them is drawn toward connection, the warmth, the familiarity, the sense of being understood. Another part is wired to protect itself from the very thing it desires. So when closeness reaches a certain threshold, something within them signals danger, even if no actual harm exists. And so they retreat. It is important to understand this clearly. Their withdrawal is not always a reflection of how they feel about you. Often, it is a reflection of how they feel about themselves in the presence of intimacy. Closeness can bring up a loss of control, a fear of dependence, or even unresolved experiences they have not fully processed. So they step back, not to end the connection, but to regulate themselves within it. You may feel the impact of this deeply. The inconsistency can create doubt, confusion, even insecurity. One moment feels connected, the next feels distant, and without awareness, it is easy to internalize their movement as rejection. But if you observe the full pattern, not just isolated moments, something becomes clear. They do not disappear completely. They come back. They reinitiate contact. They respond again. They find their way back into your space, even after creating distance. And that return matters because for someone who is truly uninterested, distance becomes permanent. There is no pull to reestablish the bond. There is no pull to reestablish the bond. But here, despite the discomfort they feel, despite the internal resistance, they are not able to fully let go. That pull back toward you is not weakness. It is attachment, However, this is where discernment becomes essential. A pattern of leaving and returning may indicate feelings, but it does not automatically indicate readiness. Love may be present, but capacity is a different matter entirely. You are not meant to normalize instability just because there is emotion behind it. So while you recognize that their return is meaningful, that it reflects an internal struggle rather than indifference, you must also remain grounded in what this pattern creates in your experience. Does it bring peace, or does it keep you in a constant state of uncertainty? Because someone can feel deeply and still be inconsistent. Someone can care and still be unavailable in the ways that matter most. Their returning shows that you are not easily forgotten. It shows that the connection has weight in their world. But the deeper question is whether they are willing to grow beyond the cycle, to not just come back, but to stay with greater stability, greater presence, greater intention. And that is where love either evolves or remains a pattern. There is a kind of care that does not announce itself, that does not seek recognition, and yet quietly works to preserve what exists between you. It does not come in the form of bold declarations or clear claims, but in subtle decisions that reveal they value the connection even if they cannot fully express it. They may not say, "This matters to me," but you will see it in how they handle situations that could disrupt the bond. They avoid unnecessary conflict, or when tension arises, they may try to smooth it over in indirect ways. They might not initiate deep emotional repair conversations, but they will shift their behavior, adjust their tone, or re-engage in a way that keeps the connection from breaking entirely. This is their version of protection. It is not loud, it is not always satisfying, but it is intentional. You may notice they are careful with how much distance they create. Even when they pull back, they rarely sever key connection completely. There is an invisible line they do not cross, a point beyond which they risk losing you, and they instinctively try to stay on the safe side of it. That awareness, even if unspoken, reflects value. They are also attentive in ways that feel almost behind the scenes. They might check in on you indirectly, ask about you through casual conversation, or stay aware of what is happening in your life without always stepping forward to openly discuss it. It can feel like they are watching from a distance, staying connected without fully stepping into the light. And while this may seem confusing, it comes from a place of wanting to keep the bond intact without exposing themselves to the vulnerability that direct expression would require. There is also a restraint in how they engage with others when it comes to you. They may not publicly define the relationship, but they are mindful not to jeopardize it. Their actions reflect a quiet respect for what exists, even if they do not label it or openly claim it. But here is where deeper clarity becomes necessary. Protecting a connection indirectly is not the same as nurturing it fully. It keeps something from breaking, but it does not always allow it to grow. And this distinction matters, because while their behavior shows that you hold significance in their world, it also reveals the limits of what they are currently able to offer. They are maintaining, not expanding, preserving, not deepening. You may feel this as a subtle tension, knowing that something real exists, yet sensing that it is being held at a distance. It is cared for, but carefully contained. And so, you learn to see both sides at once. You recognize the quiet ways they protect the connection, understanding that it comes from a place of feeling, not indifference, but you also remain aware that love, in its fullest form, does more than protect it. It expresses, it grows, it moves forward with clarity. What they are showing you is that the connection matters enough to keep. The question that remains is whether it will ever matter enough for them to fully step into it. Thank you for taking the time to reflect, grow, and explore these deeper truths. Goodbye for now. May clarity, peace, and self-worth guide you forward.